And they're not frightened, the
As
Republicans.
Mr. Paul says, he's been very consistent. He doesn't tack to the winds of the latest polls or whatever. He says what he believes, and I believe what he says. It's just that I disagree with what he says, and I think most people do as well.
All right, well, we are speaking with Dr. David Summers of the Summers Institute of Foreign Affairs, if you tuned in just now. And next up is this from BBC. Is Obama doomed in 2012? 2012 will be an important year for America. The president, elected amid such optimism in 2008, could be chucked out of office. The British term, BBC.
Yes, chucked out.
Chucked out of office. The times feel very different. The election will be a clash. This election of 2012 will be a clash of two Americas and two very different economic visions of what the country should be. The U.S. could be a fractious, jittery place by the end of the year. What do you think? How do you think Obama's going to do after the Republicans choose whoever they choose?
Well, you know, I don't think that in terms of foreign affairs that it's going to really matter a great deal. But you never know. Things just may happen in the world that it would bring foreign affairs into major consideration between the two. Mr. Obama has shown that although many people thought that he would basically contract American involvement abroad, that he was not so much that way. He doubled down on Afghanistan. He went after Osama bin Laden. He did other such things. It's going to come down to the economy, of course, right? And if the economy does not show considerable progress, I think Mr. Obama is in very serious trouble.
The BBC agrees with you.
Well,
Major factor in whether Obama survives in office is the state of the economy. Also, President Obama has disappointed many of his supporters on various issues, but Obama loyalists will point out that no mortal could have lived up to the expectations heaped upon his head, especially when he had been dealt such a poor hand. They argue that he has saved the country from ruin while accepting no one gets credit for preventing disasters.
yes, the point is many people will just vote for him because they don't like what the alternative is. But a lot of the young folks, especially, that came out in great numbers and were so enthusiastic for him, so very, very enamored of him, will just probably not go to the polls this time. And so he will lose a lot of those voters.
And volunteers also, maybe.
Exactly.
Maybe they figure, well, you know, when all's said and done, after all the hope and everything, that he's sort of similar to
Not much change.
from most other presidents.
Sure.
Yeah. Now, the independents may be like that, but as far as the young people that were Obama supporters, maybe they were disappointed.
Exactly.
Now, here's a report. This is from UPI. This is interesting. Keep in mind that not quite 5,000 soldiers, American soldiers, were killed in Iraq over about 10 years. It's about 500 a year on average. Last year in Mexico, 12,000 people were killed due to drug violence. In 10 years, that's 120,000 people if it goes at this rate. It says that there were a little bit more than 1,000 bodies that showed sign of torture. There were roughly 600 beheadings, and more women were victims this past year, more than 900 of them. What's going on down there?
Well, you know, to go back to Mr. Paul and foreign affairs, Mr. Paul has called for the legalization of all drugs, right? Again, very unpopular idea in much of the United States. But he gets support from the far left for this as well, right? I mean, he is supposedly a conservative, but he's a kind of libertarian conservative, right? So he thinks that all this is a problem basically made and manufactured by the United States. We are the biggest users, and we have this war on drugs, which he thinks is awful and should be ended immediately. Most Americans, however, do believe, I think, even now, that a legalization of drugs would be a disaster and that we should pursue the war on drugs. It most affects, however, as you point out, Mexico. Although this has spread to the United States and some of these states like Arizona and New Mexico and Texas, we may have to face very soon this matter of drug-related violence.
Well, let's explore that. That it affects Mexico mostly, but let's look at the U.S. There is the cross-border situation, the crime that's coming over this way. But also, don't forget that half of all the prisoners in prison in the U.S. are drug-related. So it affects us that way, too. Now, look, we had that Prohibition era in the 20s, and it also was quite similar, a lot of crime and a lot of problems. They finally decided to legalize it, and that was that. Now you go to the liquor store and you buy your liquor, and state or federal government gets their cut.
Congressman Paul has made that case and has made it very forcefully. No one else has dared make that case.
Well, here's the thing: you could separate it out. You could say legalize marijuana, just that, and leave the other drugs, the harder drugs, illegal. You can at least start with that and see how that goes.
In California, they've more or less done that already, and in a couple of other states as well. The federal government has, of course, not gone along with that, and that's a real problem. Constitutional problem, I think maybe the Supreme Court will have to decide.
Well, you've got people in California that were doing everything legal, and they opened stores and whatnot. They're selling.
Yes, but you.
And then the feds come in and arrest these guys.
You can get a piece of paper saying that you've got a headache and you need marijuana.
Fine.
Right?
That's the law.
Anybody can get it. Well, but
the state law. It's the state law.
That is the state law. I suppose that finally will be taken to the court to see how legitimate all this is, and if the state can do that, and that will be adjudicated. But as you say, I suppose we will have to deal with this on a national basis soon, but this is too soon.
Well, let's, while we're on the topic of drugs, which affect the brain, this from BBC. Diet can stop the brain from shrinking. Now, a shrunken brain is not good, it sounds like.
I think not.
A diet rich in vitamins and fish may protect the brain from aging, while junk food has the opposite effect. Elderly people with high blood levels of vitamins and omega-3 fatty acids, which come from fish and other things, had less brain shrinkage and better mental performance.
Well,
The
I'll consider it.
for those of you that don't want shrinking brains, the best current advice is to eat a balanced diet with plenty of fruit, vegetables, don't smoke, take regular exercise, and keep blood pressure and cholesterol in check.
I'll take note of that, certainly.
A little public service announcement.
That's good.
Since we were in that area, that
Well, of
neighborhood.
course, the general area.
All right, now let's get back to, we got 5 minutes left, roughly. Korea. This is from BBC.
Yeah.
The Korean peninsula is at a turning point, and there are opportunities for change. This is from the South Korean Prime Minister. He said Seoul would respond strongly if provoked by North Korea. He didn't want to sound too
Soft.
soft, yeah. And the two of them remain technically at war, by the way. He said that the biggest goal was stability, and that his aid for disarmament talks would resume if the North halted its nuclear activities, which I guess isn't likely.
Good.
Just for some background, Kim Jong-un is the new premier of North Korea. He succeeded his father, who died last month. So, I don't know. What do you think? You think anything will change over there?
Well, it seems unlikely, at least in the near future. That is, he's got to consolidate his hold on the country. He's not even 30 years old. I don't think they're going to make any radical changes in the very near future. It's interesting the South Korean government has now responded so positively, really. Yes, they did refuse to send a delegation to his funeral, or to the funeral of his father. But they're now trying to open up some channels for real communication with that government. After the government had sunk a warship of South Korea, shelled a major island holding of South Korea, and done other very provocative things, in which perhaps this new premier, so to speak, the great successor, as he's called, was involved. So I think the South Koreans are trying very hard to see if they can get along with the North, and perhaps that will bring some benefits.
For our viewers, what David's referring to is South Korea blames the North for sinking a warship in March of 2010, which killed 46 sailors.
They did.
South Korean sailors. And 8 months later, the North shelled a border island that was a South Korean island,
Right.
and that killed 4 people. Well, in our last moment or so, this from Reuters, stock up on gold,
Yes.
canned food, and shotgun shells. Hard times bolster the case for hard assets.
Mm-hmm.
Printing money to generate growth provides a tempting way out of a financial dilemma, but it undermines the value of financial assets. Scared investors may also be tempted to buy bonds from governments likely to withstand the worst to come, like Canada, Sweden, and Norway. But if the global financial system breaks, who is to know if the assets are retrievable? I hadn't thought about that. Capital controls and other nationalist regulations might keep one's savings locked up inside that foreign country.
Yes, we've heard this many times in the past. But strange to say, the price of gold has been going down, not up. You would suppose that given the times, that the price of gold would continue to go up. But it's retreated and retreated markedly.
Well, but gold's
peculiar.
it's only one hard asset. It's only one of many.
Yes, well, what are the others?
The others are agricultural lands, very popular. One's house.
Right. Yeah. Well, that's not doing too well either, right?
Well, but if you buy now,
Well,
for somebody who wants to protect their assets now.
perhaps.
Diamonds are worth 10 times as much as gold, but
Girl's best friend.
but in a hard time, in a dark age, is what they're talking about. Well, if we go back to our dark ages, they were saying that a can opener would be more valuable than diamonds.
Well,
And last but not least, you might have to forage for yourself, so don't forget your shotgun shells.
right.
David, we have to go. I'm so sorry. Thanks for joining us today here at NewsDesk. I'm Jason Miller. Next week, our show will be a little bit different. We have a fascinating interview with world-renowned economist Nicole Foss. Hope you'll tune in for that. That next week, as in all weeks, you can see the show 5:30 on Wednesday evenings, Friday mornings at 6:30, and Friday evenings at 9 p.m. Stay tuned for Amy Goodman with the news. Bye for now.